I thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Blum, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the panel for being here today. My questions are primarily for Mr. Storch or Mr. Bachman. How many whistleblowers have there been over the last 2 years, the last session of Congress?
I can thank you for the question. I can tell you for OSC this year, we received a total of 6,000 complaints across all of our program areas. Of those 6,000, 2,000 alleged that they had been retaliated against for blowing the whistle, and that's consistent over the last 2 years. So let's say
a third of them.
4,000, about 4,000 from our office.
Is that trend up or down, number of whistleblowers that we are aware of?
That trend is up.
And why do you think so?
I think there's several different factors. I think number one is the enhanced outreach and education that OSC, the IGs, the ombudsman have been doing throughout the government. People are...
Bud person.
Excuse me, yes. Thank you for that.
I do the same thing.
Although that is what's in the law. But I think more and more agencies and employees are better informed about their rights and where to go to make these complaints. I think there's been increased attention through Congress and the media on these rights, and I think it's encouraged more people to come forward with complaints.
Of these cases, how many were threatened by management, either explicitly or implicitly?
Of the whistleblower retaliation cases we get, I would say almost all of them are...
So the 2,000 out of the 6,000?
Yes, are saying that they have been subjected to some sort of personnel action.
And then how many positive outcomes? And would you define a positive outcome?
Positive outcome covers a range of issues. It could be us settling the or helping to settle the case between the whistleblower and the employee where they get their job back. They get some sort of damages for back pay if they were out of their job. Maybe they get a suspension rescinded, or we're able to temporarily halt their termination while we investigate it. So those are the types of things that we say are a favorable outcome. For whistleblowers over the last couple of years coming to our office, it's ranged about 200 favorable outcomes a year for whistleblowers coming to our office.
Do you need more staff?
Absolutely. We could use more resources. We are stretched to capacity. Our folks are doing a fantastic job. They're achieving record levels of successes, but they're also carrying caseloads that are 2 or 3 times as high as they normally would be.
I'm from the private sector, from Iowa, and there's a perception there, as across the nation, I think, that the federal government's bloated, that the federal employees are overpaid, and most importantly, it's next to impossible to terminate a federal employee. And I know it's not particularly your area of expertise, but what we're talking about here is accountability. So I'd like to ask, in the context of whistleblowers and retaliation, what happens to the manager, the supervisor, who threatened the retaliation? What happens? Because, often people sit here and they've done things that are, it's waste, fraud, and abuse, and I ask, did you get a bonus? The answer is yes. Did you get a promotion? Half the time it's yes. Worst case is they get reassigned. Where's the accountability in federal government? What happens to supervisors who threaten retaliation against a whistleblower? What happens?
That's an excellent question, and we couldn't agree more about the importance of the deterrence factor when it comes to disciplinary actions. As I mentioned, we have increased our rate of achieving those by over 100%. But
what kind of number are we talking about?
We're talking going from 23 in the years prior to the WPEA to 50 over the last 4 years. But in addition to that...
So 50 out of 2,000? 50
out of the 2,000, although I do want to clarify one issue on that denominator of 2,000. When we're talking about that, it doesn't, that 2,000 number includes a number of cases, for example, 15% that are actually discrimination claims, which we defer to the agency process on that, so we don't handle those. Another 12% or so we don't have jurisdiction over, and then another portion of that just don't meet the statutory.
How can we increase that? It's such a serious thing for a supervisor to retaliate against an employee who's trying to do well, trying to do something good for the taxpayers. We need to increase that number.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Resources absolutely would help, but I do want to add that there are other ways that we help to get discipline imposed. For example, through our disclosure process with the VA over the last couple of years. The VA alone has disciplined about 40, actually more than 40 employees who were implicated in wrongdoing that was brought to light by whistleblowers coming to OSC and us referring that case to the VA, they subsequently disciplined those employees. So it doesn't always have to be a formal investigation into whistleblower retaliation that leads to this accountability. It can happen through our other program areas as well, and it does.
Once again, thank you to the panel, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back the time I do not have.
I thank the gentleman from Iowa. The chair recognizes